Sweet the whispers in your ear whenever ember wanders near.
Okay, we're gonna do Nick's video about Dan Sickles, the temporarily insane Civil War general that apparently fought with like a broken leg or something like that. I think it was. So definitely we need this. It's a long one. It's like 45 minutes. So no stalling. We're going to jump right into this. So let's go.
You know, usually when I do a video on somebody, it's because they're, you know, a hero and they've done a lot of admirable things in life that you should probably look up to. And yeah, this isn't one of those times. Today we're talking about the most insane general of the American Civil War, Dan Sickles. And like I already alluded to, this guy's probably not a hero, definitely not a good role model, so why am I doing a video about him? Well, this meme went viral on Instagram a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, let's see. During the American Civil War, Union General Dan Sickles had to have his leg amputated after it was struck by a cannonball at the Battle of Gettysburg. However, instead of discarding the limb, he chose to keep it and eventually donated it to a museum where he could constantly visit it. Sometimes on these visits, he would bring visitors, and on one occasion, Mark Twain, who stated that he believed the general valued the lost leg more than his still existing one. Holy shit! This man is unhinged! Okay? And thank you, Fishy. Thank you for the tier 1.
Oh, and it subsequently got sent to me hundreds of times. With, you know, people obviously assuming he's a general, he got his leg blown off in the Civil War, it's inside a museum. Clearly, there must be an incredible story here. And while I don't know if incredible is the right word, there is definitely a story here because I'm gonna be honest with you, that's probably the least interesting thing this guy did in his entire life, and we're gonna get to all of it right after word from our sponsor.
I heard you found a new Latina.
What are you talking about? Bring me the Latina.
Delete me.
This video is brought to you by Delete Me. Super simple, straightforward business model. You give them money, they turn around and they make sure the data brokers on the internet aren't selling your personal information to anybody that wants to buy it. Okay, here's how this works. Pretty much anytime you sign up for something that's free on the internet and you give them your personal information, it's not actually free. They make their money by turning around and selling your personal information to data brokers who then turn around and sell it to the highest bidder. Now, legally speaking, these data brokers are required to stop selling your information if you ask them to. The problem is there's a ton of different data brokers. You don't know which ones have your information, and they all have a different way you have to go through submitting an opt-out request. And that's where Delete Me comes in.
Wait. Sorry. Chat, I just realized something. Are you seeing what I'm seeing right now? Are you seeing what I'm seeing right now? I think he shaved his shoulders and, like, his upper back. His arms are... his like up his shoulders, they're not hairy. They're smooth. More like his wife. I mean, maybe his wife did. More like he waxed them. I don't know if he'd wax them because of the tattoos. I'd say if anything, he would have shaved them. But yeah. Sorry, this is like this is completely fucking random. I realize that. But it struck me because one thing that always struck to me about Nick is he's a hairy motherfucker. Like, his shoulders are incredibly hairy. And yeah, like, you can see like some errant hairs, like, but like, he was furry. He was like ape man levels of hairy on like his shoulders. And it just like, out of nowhere, I just realized, oh my God, his shoulders aren't hairy anymore. And I had to say something because I'm a wackadoo like that.
And they all have a different way you have to go through submitting an opt-out request. And that's where Delete Me comes in. They monitor all of the major data brokers and they will submit opt-out requests automatically for you. And then they will continue to monitor those data brokers constantly and resubmit opt-out requests if that data broker re-gets your information. Basically, the oversimplified version of this.
When Celestium sees that ad, she's going to die for a good 5 minutes.
You think? We'll see. I'm curious if she will or not.
This is Delete Me is a subscription service that allows everything that's free on the internet to actually be free. So yeah, if you want to go check them out, I'll have a link in the discount code down below. Let's get back to the video. All right, from the top, Dan Sickles, born in 1819 in New York City. He was raised by his father, George Sickles, and his mother. His dad is a multi-millionaire real estate investor, which is equivalent to being worth hundreds of millions of dollars today.
Oh, fuck. A millionaire real estate investor before the Civil War. The context is fucking key here. A millionaire prior to the Civil War. That is insane. This man was literally like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk during the time of Civil War.
So obviously he's got a pretty cushy childhood. As a child, he was extremely intelligent, but he was also very rebellious. Eventually in his teens, he winds up getting sent off to boarding school because, you know, mom and dad are rich, they're busy, they're doing things, they can't be looking after the kids. So they send him off to boarding school. And once he gets there, the first time he goes to get reprimanded, he decides he's gonna quit, leave, and run away from boarding school. So now his dad, George, has a problem. Obviously he wants the heir to his empire to be a successful person. He wants him to, you know, go off to college, have a successful career, make a bunch of money, take over the family business one day. He's got to figure out what to do with his kid. Luckily, he's worth like hundreds of millions of dollars. The man has connections, and one of his connections is a guy by the name of Lorenzo DuPonte, who is a college professor at Columbia University. He's also like 90 years old, so presumably dad is thinking in his head like, okay, my 16-year-old rebellious son doesn't want to go to boarding school even though I'm paying a ton of money for it. That's fine. I'm going to ship him off to go live with this 90-year-old man that's done nothing but read books his entire life, and this guy is going to tutor the shit out of him so he can get into college one day. It's the perfect punishment. So that's what happens. Dan Sickles gets sent off and he goes to live with Lorenzo.
Wait, but if he ran away from the boarding school, why would he run away from the 90-year-old tutor? I'm clearly missing something here, which I'm sure Nick will enlighten me to shortly.
Now, what dad probably doesn't know is that while Lorenzo is a 90-year-old college professor now, he wasn't always that guy. You see, Lorenzo initially was a Catholic priest in Venice when he was a young man. Now, obviously, if you don't know, being a Catholic priest is supposed to be a lifelong commitment, and he's no longer a Catholic priest, so something clearly happened, and that something is women, like a lot of them.
You're a professor?
Yeah, why? You looking for some extra credit?
He got in trouble for having multiple mistresses. Then that ultimately led to him living inside of a brothel while he was a Catholic priest, where he would help to organize entertainment, and then it would all come to a head with him getting banished from Venice for, and I quote, public concubinage.
Okay, chat. Admit it. For a lot of you right now, this man is your spirit animal. Go ahead, admit it. It's fine.
As well as abducting respectable women. Now, just to be clear, abducting respectable women sounds really, really bad, but it doesn't mean what you think it means. It's just old-timey speak for he was successfully able to convince married women to sleep with him. Don't get me wrong, that's bad, but it's not like he...
Basically, this man was slinging dick all over Venice, and the women were loving him for it. And the men were pissed off that this priest was dicking up their wives way better than they ever could. Okay, let's be fucking real here.
Was out there literally kidnapping women is the point I'm trying to make. Regardless, the dude laid so much pipe they had to kick him out of the country, at which point he moves to London. For years, he becomes a well-known playwright in London. He's rubbing elbows with a bunch of important people. He becomes friends with Beethoven, as well as really good friends with Casanova. You know, the guy that slept with so many women that his literal name became a synonym for a guy that sleeps with a lot of women. He's basically the Michael Jordan of picking up chicks. And Lorenzo is apparently his Dennis Rodman. So Lorenzo lives in London for years and years.
Okay, I'm gonna take slight issue. I'm gonna take slight issue the characterization of Dennis Rodman and Michael Jordan being paired up like buddies like that. Sorry, but it was Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Okay, nobody pairs up Jordan and Rodman. People pair up Jordan and Pippen. It was all about Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Let's be fucking real here. I just gotta, as a former Chicagoan, I have to set the record straight on that bullshit right now. Okay?
Years and years, and then he's like deeply, deeply in debt, and eventually he has to declare bankruptcy and flee to America.
I declare bankruptcy!
Where he would eventually become
This is how every financial audit guest thinks that fucking bankruptcy works. Literally every single person that Caleb has on his show, every fucking one of them thinks that this is how it works.
Columbia University's first professor of Italian literature, where he still apparently did not learn his lesson because he currently lives with his adopted daughter, Maria, that is actually suspected to be his real biological daughter, and her husband, Antonio Bigoli, a famous Italian singer. If you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm trying to tell you, I don't think that dad realized when he sent his son to go live with this guy that he was actually sending his rebellious 16-year-old son to go learn how to be a man and get ready for life, to be tutored by a 3-time Pro Bowl womanizing Hall of Famer. So 16-year-old Dan Sickles shows up to live with these guys. They all become great friends, basically family. He gets along wonderfully.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to be pausing a lot. Every time Nick says his name, after Nick said it just now, it clicked into me. I'm going to fucking laugh. Think about it. His name is Dan Sickle. Say his name quickly. Dan Sickle. He is a fucking Dan Sickle. That's gonna be going through my fucking head every time Nick says his name. He's a Dan Sickle. Oh my god, please tell me you guys aren't fun. Like a popsicle? A dancicle? Popsicle? Dancicle? Please tell me you get it now. It's not as funny when I have to explain the fucking pun, but damn it.
With Maria, Antonio, and Lorenzo, and Maria and Antonio also just had their daughter, Teresa, who he absolutely adores. And this goes on for years, and exactly what dad wanted to happen, happened. You know, Lorenzo becomes that father figure, that man that he looks up to, and presumably Lorenzo's sharing all of his stories from back in the heyday, because very quickly Dan Sickles starts becoming a womanizer himself and attending brothels. So
they wanted a piece of that dancicle. If he's gonna be a womanizer throughout adulthood, that joke is coming the fuck back. I'm telling you right now, that joke is gonna be coming back multiple times if he ends up being a womanizer as an adult.
That's not great, but hey, he did at least get into college and starts going to college for a couple of years. 2 years into college, when he's a sophomore, Lorenzo passes away. Dan's kind of heartbroken about it, doesn't really want to go to college anymore, so he drops out and decides that he's going to become a lawyer. And you gotta remember, this is back in the day where you didn't have to go to college to be a lawyer. You could just, you know, do it through correspondence, or you could study on your own and then go pass the bar like Abraham Lincoln did. Or if daddy's got money and connections, you could do what Dan Sickles did and basically get given a job directly from one of the best lawyers in the country at the time, a guy by the name of Benjamin F. Butler, who was previously a practicing law partner with the president Martin Van Buren and also was the district attorney under Andrew Jackson. So he studies under him, he becomes a lawyer. Apparently he's actually pretty good at being a lawyer, but more importantly, from a young age, he's rubbing elbows and becoming friends with very influential, very powerful people all over Washington, D.C. Because of this, he gets heavily involved in politics, and he is what you would consider a Northern Democrat. So real quick, oversimplified version of what's going on here. You have the Republican Party that was basically founded to free the slaves, and then you have the Democrat Party, which is the pro-slavery party, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. You have Southern Democrats and Northern Democrats. The Southern Democrats are obviously all outrageously pro-slavery, and then the Northern Democrats basically fall into two factions referred to as the Hunkers and the Barn Burners at the time. And they are actively feuding. And when I say feuding, I don't mean like they're talking aggressively on the floor in Congress. I mean, they're going to the bars with brass knuckles and Bowie knives and actually beating the shit out of each other, and people are dying in what amounts to gang fights.
I'm gonna say it. Things were based back then. Did that fucking based? I think that needs to come back. No, things absolutely. I absolutely think that this shit needs to come back. We used to be a proper country. I'm just saying, we used to be a proper fucking country.
And what they're fighting over is westward expansion. So at this point in time, people are expanding west, there's new territories and new states opening up, and the hunkers believe that these new territories and these new states should be allowed to decide for themselves if they want to be allowed to have slaves or not, and the barn burners are coming in from the opposite end of the spectrum, like absolutely not. They should not be allowed to be slave states or slave territories. Slavery should stop where it's at. We should not expand the practice any further. And Dan Sickles,
You know what? They both have excellent points. Not about the slavery issue. Obviously, with the slavery issue, it's like, yeah, abolish the shit. Thankfully, the United States did abolish slavery in its entirety. Brilliant, wonderful, glad it happened. But the debunkers have a point. It's kind of the foundation of how the United States was built, on that the states should govern themselves. Like, take the slavery quotient out of it. The bunkers, like, honestly, we're just maintaining the constitutionality of the foundation of the United States of America. So, like, respect to them for saying, like, yeah, the state should be able to govern themselves. Except for the slavery part, the fact that they wanted to keep the slavery part, and it was kind of like, fuck, no, you were there. You were so close. You were almost right there, and then you fucking fumbled and face-planted it.
is a hunker, which is, at the time, the more popular of the two positions. So he becomes pretty well-known, pretty powerful politically, engaging in this fight. On top of that, he's still going out being a womanizer, particularly at brothels. But Dan Sickles has expensive tastes. He doesn't want any entry-level prostitutes. He wants the cream of the crop, so to speak.
He wants the dream dancicle treatment.
He's going to the fanciest, nicest brothels in town, and that's pretty expensive, so he agrees that he will write a political pamphlet in exchange for being paid up front $1,000, which is like $40,000 today.
Damn!
The pamphlet never gets finished, never gets distributed, and he allegedly pockets all the money.
Sucker.
Around the same time, he also gets accused of mortgage fraud, so now he's kind of this like sketchy character that's engaged in, borderline gang violence politically, and he's taking people's money and not fulfilling his end of the bargain. But presumably, he needs that money because he has a favorite prostitute, and that favorite prostitute of his is very expensive because she is the head mistress at the wealthiest brothel in town, and he wants to pay for exclusivity. And her name is Fanny White, which sounds...
That's a common name back then, but I'm fucking sorry. What the fuck? Hit me, Jenner. Take this Miss White ass. Because so fucking cards, she got a big old fat white ass. He wants to cream that dreamsicle all over it. Oh, damn, I want to play joke, but I don't care. This is just too funny in my own damn head. Oh, my fucking god, this is so fucking good. I love this man. I love this man's life.
like a product description of what she's selling, but no, that's her literal name, Fanny White. Okay, I'm living in a simulation. There's no other explanation. That is a colonial era stripper name if I have ever heard one. Like, ladies and gentlemen, now coming to the stage, Booty White. Okay, jokes aside, she had to be like a perfect 10, right? I mean, Dan Sickles is the heir to like $100 million, very powerful politically, and he's paying for exclusivity.
God, she's
she had to
chocolate.
be a total dime piece. Luckily, I found a picture.
Okay. In fairness, back then, pre-Civil War, she probably was a smoke show. For back then, pre-Civil War. Remember the time period, context of pre-Civil War, she was probably considered a smoke show.
I wonder what the criteria is to become the head prostitute at a brothel. She doesn't look like she enjoys her job.
True. He wasn't paying for the face. He wasn't even paying for her mouth. He was paying for a different... Yeah. There's that.
My sister's been through a lot. Of dick.
I'm getting sidetracked, sorry. Anyways, Dan Sickles is now paying Fanny White for exclusivity, and he's not shy about it at all. Like, he starts taking her out to, like, political events and dates and bringing her around town, like, and everybody knows who this is. This is, like, the most famous prostitute in the area, and Dan Sickles is just, like, not embarrassed or shy about it whatsoever. Which is hilarious because, like, what are you gonna do? You gonna judge the guy? You gonna say something? You gonna lean over to your wife at dinner and be like, can you believe that Dan Sickles is being seen in public with that prostitute? And then your wife goes, oh my God, he is? Wait a minute, how do you know who the most famous prostitute in town is? Okay, Dan Sickles is just a menace to society at this point, so naturally he takes the next logical step. He runs for political office and actually gets elected to the New York Assembly. That's in 1847. That same year, he gets censured from the New York State Assembly for bringing Fanny White into the actual assembly chambers. After that, he goes back to being a lawyer, as well as buying Fanny White a house, which she turns into one of the most successful brothels in town. Interestingly enough, one of the names on the tax filings for this brothel house in 1851 was the name Antonio Bagoli, Lorenzo's son-in-law, so he's apparently back in town and doing business with Dan Sickles. So now, presumably at this point, Dan's got his brothel going on, he's got his law practice going on, and then his, like, adoptive family is hanging out with him again, Antonio, his wife Maria, and their now 10-year-old daughter, Teresa. And this goes on for, like, the next 5 years, and then in 1852, Dan Sickles decides that he is going to propose to the then 15 or 16-year-old Teresa Bagoli.
I saw it coming. I didn't say anything. I saw it coming when Nick said that they showed up with their 10-year-old daughter. I'm like, oh no. Oh, he's gonna fuck the kid, isn't he? And yeah, like, again, contextually, 15 years old, back pre-Civil War era, that was marrying age. However, the age disparity. Yeah, the age disparity is creepy as all fuck.
Why don't you have a seat there and get comfortable for that?
Okay, just for the record, he's like 32, and I know what you're thinking, like, oh, people got married really young back then. Was that kind of normal? Was that the standard? No, this was still weird even back then, and I know that he knows that it's fucking weird because around the same time, he also started lying about his age, telling everybody that he was born in 1825, not 1819, so he could make the age gap look smaller. So even he knows what he's doing is gross. Okay, and remember, he's like politically connected, so not only do they wind up getting married,
average marriage age for women back then was 20. Okay, so this got old. So we're starting off with a 20-year age gap and 5 years before standard marrying age of women, and he's lying about his age, so it doesn't seem to, my guy. Oh, you're a PDF. Oh, Dan Sickles' PDF. Whoa. Fucking hell.
They get married and the ceremony is performed at City Hall by the mayor of New York City, which is fucking insane. I'm not happy about it, but that's what happened, okay? Don't blame me. So, despite all of this, despite marrying a 15-year...
Holy shit, you're right, he is OG EDP. Oh God, EDP is being controlled by the spirit of Dan Sickles. Oh God, there's our answer. There's our answer. EDP is inhabited by the spirit of Dan Sickles. We have solved the mystery of why he's such a disgusting human being. That's true. EDP is not cool enough, but being possessed by the spirit of Dan Sickles doesn't necessarily change the physiology of EDP. And maybe maybe EDP was able to affect just enough control that only the pedophilia part of Dan Sickles invaded his mind, whereas the rest of it is still EDP, and I'm going out of my fucking head trying to come up with this stupid comparable joke. I'm gonna stop now.
16-year-old when he's 33, political scandal, despite being a sketchy businessman accused of stealing money and mortgage fraud, despite, running around town with a renowned prostitute and helping her run a brothel, 3 months after his wedding, he becomes New York City's attorney. You gotta love politics.
You want a criminal lawyer. Know what I'm saying?
Shortly after that, Teresa gets pregnant.
Brother,
So now Dan Sickles is going to be a dad. He's going to have a kid. And what do kids need? Kids need a park. And you know what New York City doesn't really have? A nice big park. So Dan Sickles sets out to make it happen. I'm not going to get into everything he did politically, but basically the man goes on a political crusade and he is instrumental in helping push the legislation that would go on to create Central Park in New York City. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Central Park, that's a good thing, right? Maybe this is the point in the story where Dan Sickles turns his life around. He starts doing a bunch of good things. I mean, we'll see, because shortly after this, he gets appointed to be the delegate for London by the President of the United States, and he's going to have to move over to London and represent the United States of America. He then proceeds to go home and tell his young wife, Teresa, that he has to go to London for a couple of years, and she's going to remain here and look after the house. She's heartbroken. She wants to go with him, but ultimately she decides her husband knows what's best.
Oh, no. He's gonna go to London and have God knows how many fucking mistresses in London. Oh, no.
Then goes to the brothel and tells Fanny White, pack your shit, we're going to London.
Okay. But I was partially right. I will accept partial credit. I think I deserve partial credit on this one.
From here, Dan Sickles parades Fanny White around London, taking her to political balls and operas and theaters and all kinds of stuff, allegedly at one point even introducing her to the Queen of England. And it all works out fine because the British don't know who she is, and everybody back home is still stuck in the same situation of, oh my God, he introduced a prostitute to the Queen of England. We have to say something. We can't say anything because then everybody knows we know who the most famous prostitute is. So shockingly enough, he does not get in trouble for introducing his side piece to the Queen.
Well, because polite society kept everyone silent. Because everybody was so obsessed with appearances, none of this got out. Think about that. If it wasn't for people caring more about appearances than actually, like, actual content of character, none of this this entire story might never have happened.
But on July 4th, 1854, in London, he goes to an event celebrating American independence, and when he gets there, it's mostly British people, and he's annoyed by that because he doesn't want to celebrate American independence with a bunch of British people. And then everything just starts to bother him. Like, he's looking around, there's a giant painting of the king, there's a giant painting of the queen, and then there's like a little painting in the corner of George Washington. He's not about it.
There has to be at least 3 times bigger than this.
Then they play the Star-Spangled Banner, except they censored out any negative things about Great Britain. After that, it's time for a toast. Surely we're going to be toasting America or George Washington or somebody important that he cares about. No, this toast is to the Queen. So Dan Sickles refuses to rise for the toast. He's the only one that does it. It's a humongous political scandal. He basically gets kicked out of the party and then promptly kicked out of his position and sent back home to America. Okay, look, broken clocks right twice a day. That shit's kind of funny. And you know who agrees with me on that? Pretty much everybody in New York, because when Dan Sickles arrives back home to America, he is treated as a hero and people love him for doing that. Because of that, he's pretty quickly elected to the New York State Senate, where he serves for 2 years. He is then elected.
And Dan Sickles just basically lived on a very simple, basic, based principle. How can you argue with that?
To be one of the U.S. House of Representatives for the state of New York, like in the federal government. Bear in mind, he's still a rabid womanizer, sleeping with prostitutes, sleeping with women, still has a relationship with Fanny White. Gets elected anyways. Politics never changes, apparently. So now he's got to get a place down in Washington, D.C. He buys a house that is like literally across the street from the White House, moves his wife Teresa down there. He's down there half the year, and during that time, Fanny White gets lonely, so she finds a wealthier, older man by the name of Jake Leroy. Unfortunately for her, Jake Leroy has a venereal disease that he subsequently gives to her and ruins her career.
I can't do nothing else but play football. Hey, don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. I can't do nothing else.
While he's down in Washington, D.C., one of the first things he does is he helps President James Buchanan get elected, so he is now homies with the president. From here,
Oh,
he's just
shit.
doing whatever, politicians do in Washington, D.C. I don't know if they had insider trading back then, but he was still going around cheating on his wife constantly. And by this point in time, young Teresa is very aware of what's going on. It breaks her heart, and allegedly from like the writings and, letters that I've seen, she basically like asks him, like, what do these women have that I don't have? Like, it's really sad to read. She's clearly in love with this man and heartbroken that he keeps choosing other women besides her. And also from everything I've read, she is, like 19, 20 years old at this point, an appropriate age, a lot of people would say. And she's quite the catch. Apparently she's very beautiful. She speaks like 5 languages. She's from a wealthy family. She knows how to act and behave in these aristocratic circles. Like, she's stunning. Which
Right. This has got me turning over on Sicky Boy. This has got me turning. He has a fucking gem of a wife. Absolute gem. And she's like she's complete package. No, I wasn't rooting for him, but I was like laughing along with him at his antics, and he was funny, and I was like, yeah, this guy's a, he's funny and everything, but now it's like, he has me this has me kind of turning on him in that I don't think his shit's so funny anymore. He's a fucking dog. She's a fucking princess. Oh, this poor girl.
just goes to add insult to injury. Like, not only is your husband cheating on you, but you're like this catch, and he's going out and cheating on you with women in brothels constantly. It makes her look horrible in the public aristocratic circles. So,
like, not only is she smart and proper, she's gorgeous. So why is he not fucking her instead of all of the prostitutes? Like, unless she's like a cold fish, and I mean, okay, I'll do a possibility. Like, maybe she's a cold fish in bed. Maybe she's an ice queen, and is just like kind of like a pillow princess, and just kind of lays there, and he's wanting something more. Maybe, but I doubt it. I'm trying to throw out a possible reason. I seriously doubt it. I really do. I think he's just a fucking dog. It's like, oh, damn it.
so that's going on, but around the same time, Dan Sickles also meets and becomes pretty good friends with Philip Barton Key, the son of Francis Scott Key, aka the guy that wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, and he is currently serving as the attorney for the District of Columbia. And apparently he's not very good at his job. He's about to get fired, which would be a huge embarrassment. I mean, he's from a wealthy family. His dad literally wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. That can't happen. Luckily, he's friends with Dan Sickles now, who's highly connected, and Dan Sickles makes sure that he gets to keep his job. From here, they keep being homies. Dan Sickles got a very busy schedule, though. He's working as a politician. He's got to go sleep with a bunch of women at brothels. He doesn't have time for all this extracurricular socializing in the aristocratic circles that Teresa wants to go out and do. So he has a genius idea. He's like, hey, Philip, my buddy, my trusted friend, how would you like to take my wife to all these social events so I can go bang hookers? So with Dan Sickles' permission, Philip Key starts taking Teresa to all these social events over the course of 6 months or a year.
Oh, please tell me that Teresa falls in love with Philip. They have an affair, they elope, and leave him alone with nothing but his hookers. Please, I would love for that to happen.
They wind up falling in love and start having an affair. Eventually, people start to take notice at these social events that they're getting a little bit too cozy together. They report that to Dan Sickles. Dan Sickles confronts Key about it, and he's like, hey, are you sleeping with my wife? And Key rejects it. He says, no, they're just rumors. Dan Sickles believes his buddy and chalks it up to a bunch of rumors. He doesn't really care about being scandalous. He was parading a prostitute around for 10 years. Like, he doesn't care about rumors. His buddy's not banging his wife. Good enough for him. Moving on. But now the problem for Teresa and Philip is that Dan is onto him. They've got to be subtle. They've got to be discreet, okay? And I mean, it can't be that hard, right? It's back in the day. There's no cell phones. Nobody's tracking you. There's no text messages to find. Like, it'd be pretty easy to cheat and get away with it, right? They've just got to.
Not really. Not really. Hello, Justfer. Thank you. It actually wouldn't be, because for a couple specific reasons. They're well-known figures, and they obviously dress very well. So you couple with that, anywhere they go, unless they are specifically, not even someone, like, you are correct about servants and everything. Absolutely correct about that. But at the same time, when you are a popular figure, you've got Philip, who is the attorney for the city. Dan is obviously very popular for a variety of different reasons. Teresa is his wife. So they go to these political parties. Their faces are very well known. Unless they specifically dressed down and hid their faces wherever they went, if they went somewhere to try and sneak off to be alone, people would recognize them. They would know who they are, and then word would then travel. The scuttlebutt would then travel throughout the city. Rumors would spread even further, and people would say, "Oh, we saw Philip and Teresa over here. They were doing this, they were doing that." It's like you don't need modern day technology to basically have essentially an unofficial, unintentional spy network working for you.
Be subtle. That's all they've got to do. So naturally, Philip Key decides the best way to go about this is to rent the house down the street from Teresa and Dan's house and have it exclusively for banging Teresa.
Where was a bold move?
Okay, could have picked a better location, but all right, that's fine, whatever. Now the problem is, how are you going to send the bat signal up that it's time to take you to Pound Town? Because we don't have cell phones, I can't exactly send a text message, and I don't think a carrier pigeon would be very practical. So he comes up with a way to discreetly signal her, and that is by pacing up and down the street in front of her house, waving a white handkerchief until she sees him, and then he doubles back to the house and waits for her to arrive.
What's he doing out there?
Obviously, people catch on to this. And Dan Sickles winds up receiving an anonymous letter detailing how this entire thing breaks out. So he sits across the street in the park one day with a set of opera goggles, binoculars, whatever you want to call them, and witnesses the entire thing. Dan Sickles then confronts his wife about it. She breaks down, confesses to everything, and Dan has her write down everything that had happened and sign her name, verifying, basically getting a written confession that she did in fact cheat on him. Now this is like February 24th, February 25th of 1859, and for the next couple of days, they're still living at home, I presume sleeping in separate rooms, separated. Dan Sickles is like heartbroken, he's dramatic, he's crying all the time, and then on...
Hey, hold up. Oh, he's so heartbroken. Motherfucker! You are running around hookers day and night, and you're gonna be heartbroken that instead of fucking your wife and you're fucking a hooker, and you're going to be heartbroken that your wife found comfort in another man's arms that actually cared about her. You, dude. Just fuck you.
The 27th, one of his friends finally comes to check on him. And that man's name is Mr. Butterworth. He finds Dan Sickles basically laying in bed, crying, feeling sorry for himself. And while Mr. Butterworth is there, guess who's walking up and down in front of Dan Sickles' house, waving a fucking handkerchief? Philip Barton Key.
Now you're going to die.
At this point, the accounts vary, but basically what happens is Dan convinces Mr. Butterworth to go out and talk to Key in person. And so that's what happens. He goes outside, he's talking to Key out in front of the house for a couple of minutes, and then a couple of minutes later, here comes Dan Sickles walking up in a trench coat, and inside of that trench coat is 3 pistols. Now, bear in mind, just so we're on the same page, this is like in front of the White House, okay? So Dan Sickles approaches, pulls out a pistol, and says something along the lines of, "Key, you scoundrel, you have disgraced my house." And then
I started blasting. Bang!
The first bullet grazes Key's hand. The second bullet, far more accurate, hits exactly where he wanted it to, directly in Key's groin. The third bullet then misses, presumably because Key fell down after getting shot in the dick. Now Key is propped up sitting on the ground, and he reaches into his coat pocket to grab something, and he is then struck again in the chest, killing him. Again, this is right in front of the White House. Obviously, it's a busy street. There's like 15 eyewitnesses that just saw a sitting congressman basically execute the district attorney in front of the White House. And one of those witnesses was a young White House page by the name of Bonnets, basically a messenger boy for the White House. He sees this unfold and runs directly to President Buchanan and immediately tells him Dan Sickles just killed the district attorney in front of the White House. Now remember, Dan Sickles and Buchanan are homeboys, so Buchanan immediately leaps into action. He tells the White House page Bonnets, "Hey, kid, look, here's what's gonna happen. You're a key witness to a murder, so they're probably gonna arrest you and then hold you, and you're gonna be stuck there for weeks or months without pay because they're not gonna want you to go anywhere because they're gonna want you to testify in court. So as your president, I would highly recommend that you just go back home to South Carolina or wherever you're from and lay low. Otherwise, you're gonna be held in jail." At which point, as far as I know, the White House page listens to what the president just told him, and gets out of town. Okay, do you understand what just happened? The
Holy
fucking president
fuck.
of the United States just put the bro code before the Constitution, all right? He literally said, I don't give a shit what happened. That's my boy. I'm getting rid of the witnesses.
My God. Fucking oh my God. That's a fucking bro. That is a fucking bro. That is at the level of whose car we taking. Yeah, you gotta respect it. You gotta respect it. As shitty as this might be, and bear in mind, there are no good guys in this story right now. You had the one, you had Philip, who was fucking, oh God, excuse me. You had Philip, who was fucking Dan's wife. You had Teresa, who was involved in the fucking. You had Dan, who was a philanderer. But it's still like, you know, this matter of honor. You're fucking my wife, and I didn't give you permission to, which is fucking stupid as hell, and I fully appreciate that. Like, there are, like, no actual good people in this story right now. Like, yeah, romanticists will go, oh, it's actually romantic. The two, like, Philip, like, took Teresa out, and she was lonely, and they fell in love, and yeah, but they still cheated. She still cheated on him. He still facilitated the cheating. He went even further with it. It's like, this is fucking insane. And the fact that the goddamn president is like, that's my boy. I'm protecting my boy. This is fucking crazy, and I love every moment of it. I do. And hi, Fulka. It's been a while. How you doing? Oh, there we go.
After that, Dan Sickles is arrested pretty much immediately because obviously, and they set the court case up, and the court case is not looking good. Prior to the event unfolding, he had his wife sign a written confession, which looks like he's gathering evidence for his defense prior to it happening, which looks like it's premeditated. He started the confrontation, so self-defense is pretty much out. He also had 3 guns on him at the time when he started the altercation, again, leaning towards premeditated. He got his friend to either knowingly or unknowingly help him, Mr. Buttersworth, by distracting him. And again, whether it was intentional or not, he did shoot him in the groin, and he did it for sleeping with his wife, which kind of leans towards he did that shit on purpose, and it was also premeditated. So for 99.9% of people, this would be an open shut case, and he would be walking towards the gallows in about a week. But Dan Sickles is mobbed up. He's connected with the local politicians. He's homeboys with the president, and they get him the best legal team in the country. On this legal team is a lawyer by the name of James T. Brady, who is pretty much the foremost leading legal scholar on pleas of insanity. He's already won multiple murder trials by pleading insanity. The problem is Dan Sickles is a sitting congressman, and if he pleads insanity and it's successful, he's still going to be an insane person, which would make him unfit for office, and then the Democrats would lose a seat, and they can't have that. Now, they're still going to plead insanity because it's the only chance they have, but they're going to plead that it was temporary insanity, just a little whoopsie-daisy. He wasn't feeling himself that day. And
Fuck me! Damn it, if this is not topical as fuck right now! Oh my God! I did not realize that this video would actually be somewhat fucking topical! Oh my dear God!
yes, this is the first time in human history that temporary insanity is used as a legal defense, and this is where it comes from. And to add even more fuel to the fire, James Buchanan.
Oh. So we have Dansicle to blame for all of the scumbags that have gotten off on temporary insanity pleas. Oh, fuck you, Dansicles! Fuck you and your Dansicle! Damn it! Yeah, he just made a little oopsie poopsie, a little fucky wucky. Oh, god damn it.
Cannon is not done supporting his boy. He is involved in some capacity. I'm gonna be honest with you and up front, I don't know exactly what. The accounts of what exactly he did vary, but basically the claims are he was writing Dan Sickles letters while he was in jail, he visited Dan Sickles while he was in jail, and one of them even claims he showed up in the courtroom in front of the jury and shook Dan Sickles' hand. And regardless of if only one of those things happened or all of those things happened, everybody knows that the president is backing Dan Sickles in this legal battle, which leads to a lot of people at the time assuming that because this was in Washington, D.C. on federal property, even if Dan Sickles is convicted of murder, his homeboy, the president, is just gonna pardon him no matter what. Okay, now thought experiment. You're on the jury. At this point, you know all of this, and you have pretty much two options. Option A, you let the corrupt, guilty politician walk, and then you go home, and everything moves on in life. Option B, you declare him guilty, and then there's a good chance he's still gonna walk anyways, and then you have a target on your back by the president of the United States and a bunch of corrupt politicians.
And this is an age where they could make you disappear a lot fucking easier than they could in 2026. Oh, nice to see that this level of corruption extends back hundreds of fucking years from today. Fucking hell.
Which one are you gonna pick?
Okay, I'd like a B.
So obviously Dan Sickles is declared innocent by plea of temporary insanity, set free to go, and allowed to keep his seat in Congress.
Oh, my sweet fuck. And that set a legal precedent. Think about this. It's not that the lawyer was able to successfully argue temporary insanity. It's because of corrupt politicians basically intimidating the jury that a plea of temporary insanity was allowed as a defense. And that plea of temporary insanity was then written into case law, which is why it is being used to this fucking day in modern courts for temporary insanity cases. Fuck. Honestly, I think a smart attorney would dig into this even further. A smart attorney now could take this in knowledge that Nick has produced, dig into this even further, and if it was true that basically the jury came back with a plea of not guilty by temporary insanity because of the legal and political pressures exhibited upon them during this trial, and that is what resulted as them saying, okay, the temporary insanity plea works, and thus is written into case law, that you could theoretically, big time theoretically here, this is probably in the realms of dreamland. I fully appreciate that. But a skilled attorney could potentially run this up to the Supreme Court to eliminate the entire concept of the temporary insanity defense. Potentially, if the planets aligned in a dream space where Freddy did not exist, this could work to completely eliminate the temporary insanity defense in the U.S. legal system.
Officially creating the case law and legal precedent for the plea of temporary insanity for every other court case literally ever. I mean, who would have ever guessed that pleading temporary insanity was actually a legal device that was manufactured by corrupt politicians to allow them to not have to face the consequences of their own actions?
Who would have thought? Not me.
Buh! He shot the guy that was sleeping with his wife. I think that's kind of based. Buh. Okay, stop. No, if he was a good moral man that was faithful to his wife and then he murdered the guy that his wife was having an affair with, maybe I would have some more sympathy, but that's not what happened. This dude was a serial cheater for a decade that was parading around town with prostitutes, introducing them to the Queen of England, and the millisecond that he got a taste of his own medicine, he started murdering people.
Wow! Sounds a little bit familiar, doesn't it? You know, certain group in the modern day that loves to pontificate, call you the bad guy about everything, and the minute you Uno reverse them and go, aha, this you, they instantaneously go schizo and think that you should be ended? Boy, that sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Just saying.
And then to escape the consequences of his own actions, he creates what is probably the most abused and controversial legal precedent of all time, temporary insanity. So after the trial, Dan Sickles ends up reconciling with his wife Teresa, and they wind up getting back together, and the public is absolutely outraged by this. And you gotta remember, at this point in time, it was all about, you know, honor. So from the public's perspective, what had happened was Teresa and his best friend had an affair together, which dishonored Dan Sickles. That caused him to become temporarily insane and kill his friend.
Isn't temporary insanity now called crimes of passion? I believe it may still be categorized as temporary insanity, and the examples of how it can be utilized, like crime of passion is sort of like a lay term or an example of how a temporary insanity defense can be utilized in a criminal proceeding. So I don't think they reclassified it as crime of passion. It's just utilized as like a crime of passion.
So their expectation at this point was, because he had been dishonored, was that he was going to cast Teresa out, she would be labeled an adulterer and be socially ruined, and Dan could be a man that maintained his honor. I'm not saying that's necessarily right, but it makes sense in context. Dan got dishonored by two people, Dan got rid of the two people, Dan maintains his honor. That's the logic. But when he takes Teresa back, he's essentially dishonoring himself by allowing her to stay, and that pisses off the public, because now it comes into question of like, okay, honor is super important. That was your justification for killing a man, right or wrong. It's understandable, but then you immediately turn around and dishonor yourself. So when someone else dishonors you, you can murder them, but when it's convenient for you, you can dishonor yourself. That seems hypocritical, and everybody's upset now. And this kind of ruins...
Again, doesn't this sound kind of familiar? Good for ye, not for me. We are getting a shocking amount of modern day parallels going on here that I was not anticipating, okay?
Dan Sickles' political career for the next couple of years, and then the Civil War breaks out. Now remember, Dan Sickles, Northern Democrat, particularly a hunker. Those were the guys that were more sympathetic to the Southern Democrats, and they weren't necessarily pro-slavery, but they were, you know, permissive with slavery. They thought new states and new territories should have the right to choose if they wanted to be slave states or not. And generally speaking, the reason a lot of them held this position was because their ultimate goal was to just keep the Union together, and they figured this was the best way to do it by having the compromise of every state has the right to choose for itself. So when the Civil War kicks off and the South is like, we're leaving the Union, a lot of the Northern Democrats are like, the fuck you are, the gloves come off, they fully back Abraham Lincoln, and they fight for the Union. Dan Sickles included. He goes back home to New York, organizes all the New York militias into a singular brigade, and then takes it to the Union Army and is like, here's what I got. And here's the problem. A brigade, that's a big military unit. That's like 4,000 to 5,000 guys, and the officer in charge of a brigade is supposed to be a general. So now the notion is that Dan Sickles on day one, with no military experience, is supposed to be commissioned as a general in the Union Army, and that has to be approved by Congress.
No.
And Congress refuses to confirm him for obvious reasons. A, it's Dan Sickles. B, he has no military experience. And C, he was declared insane like 45 minutes ago. So Dan is forced to relinquish command, at which point he goes back to Washington, D.C. and starts lobbying all of his political connections to get him confirmed as a general. Which raises a question like, why? How? Why would you allow this? Okay, you have to put it all in the political context of, if you're on the Republican side of the aisle, say you're Abraham Lincoln, and you have Dan Sickles, who, despite everything, is a very powerful, very well-known politician that is a Democrat that was more pro-slavery for a Northern Democrat, and he has just raised an army, brought it to you, and said, I'm willing to fight on your side. If you turn that guy away, doesn't really look good. It looks like, you know, you're not letting everybody join your club. You're turning it into a political rift between the Republicans and the Democrats that are in the North. Which,
not only that, I don't know if this will be consideration, but then you're also all of the military that you have brought into play. If they're coming in expecting Dan to be leading them, how are they going to respond if all of a sudden Congress says, no, this is we came here for Dan, and now Congress is saying, no, Dan's not going to lead you. You have to go into something else. How is this army going to? How is this this collective of soldiers going to respond? Are they suddenly going to go, well, cool, then we're not fighting for you anymore, and now you've just lost military strength in this war?
If your goal is to preserve the Union, not really what you want to do, you want to bring as many people to your side as possible and say we're all in this together. So, most likely for that reason, Dan Sickles is successful in lobbying Washington, D.C. and gets commissioned as a general. So Dan Sickles goes back, takes command of his brigade, and to his credit, he does a pretty good job as a general initially. Remember, despite all of his character flaws, he is still highly intelligent. He appears to be trying his best to learn how to be a good general and a good leader. He appears to be well liked by his men. He appears to genuinely care about his men, and he appears to get along with a lot of the other generals. Particularly his boss, Major General Joseph Hooker, which is hilarious because who would have ever thought that Dan Sickles, of all people, would get along great with a hooker?
I feel shocked.
Under the command of General Hooker, Dan Sickles and his brigade, the Excelsior Brigade, rack up a pretty serious combat record. They fight at Seven Pines, they fight in the 7 Days battles, they fight at Oak Grove, all of which Dan Hooker and his brigade perform well. And when they're not fighting, Hooker and Sickles are partying together, they're drinking, they're sleeping with women. Allegedly during this period of time, according to a letter that is in the National Archives, Dan Sickles fathered a child with one of these women that he slept with in one of these towns that their army unit was in. So while he may be a good general during the daytime hours, he's still Dan Sickles at night. But hey, we're on a roll. We're judging people on how they perform on the battlefield, not who they play hide the stick with at night. So for that reason, Dan Sickles is promoted to a division commander. Shortly after that, General Hooker gets promoted to the commander of the Army of the Potomac, at which point he pretty much gives Dan Sickles another promotion to Corps Commander. Now again, this is a big deal because this made Dan Sickles the only Corps Commander that didn't go to West Point, but it gets signed off on by Abraham Lincoln himself, and Dan Sickles becomes a Corps Commander. So now Dan is in charge of like 14,000 guys, and the next big battle they fight in is the Battle of Chancellorsville. Real quick, oversimplified version of what's happening. Basically, the Union should win this pretty much immediately. They have General Lee outnumbered 2-1, and Hooker has geniusly outflanked him and got him in this massive pincher movement. All he needs to do is send the troops in and crush him. The problem is, early on in this battle, General Hooker got blown up by some artillery or something, and he now has a head injury. He probably has a concussion, and he refuses to send the order to go in and take out Lee. And this affords General Lee to basically set up a blocking position on one side for one of his flanks while sending the main body of his force out to the other flank and outflank Hooker's flank. And inside of that flank is Sickles' Corps. Now, while all this is happening, Lee has set up the blocking position. He is secretly, under the cover of night, moving his main force over, and then he's going to send the flank around. Dan is at this place called Hazel Grove. It's a good open field to have a battle in that favors him. And Dan receives intel that there's Confederates moving out and around his position, and he assumes that they're retreating, so he requests permission to go out and attack them while they're retreating. They're not actually retreating, they're secretly moving around to outflank him, but he doesn't know that yet. But he gets denied, they tell him to hold his ground. And Dan, shockingly, decides to be a good soldier and follow orders, so he holds his ground. He then receives orders to fall back from his position to the Chancellor House at this crossroads right over here. Again, he doesn't want to do this, he thinks that's a bad idea, but he follows orders and he does it anyways. The Confederates then take his position at Hazel Grove.
The one fucking time when him bucking what someone says would have been beneficial to him, and he doesn't do it. Oh, shit.
And use it to light up his new position with artillery. And this plays a huge role in the Union ultimately losing the Battle of Chancellorsville, a battle that they probably absolutely should have won. They had him outflanked and outnumbered 2-1, but General Lee managed to outflank the flank, and it's regarded as one of his greatest military performances of all time. And this is still controversial and debated today, but the question is, had Dan Sickles not followed orders and attacked what he thought was retreating Confederates, would he have caught Lee's flanking maneuver and changed the entire course of the battle? Or had he followed that order but then chose to not fall back to the Chancellor House, would it have changed the outcome of the battle altogether? So while we'll never know for sure if this was in fact the right or wrong decision, I'm willing to bet from Dan Sickles' perspective and the perspective of his men, it definitely didn't feel like the right decision as soon as they started getting bombarded with artillery from the position they just gave to the Confederates.
Yeah, fair.
After the Battle of Chancellorsville, General Hooker gets relieved of command. He gets replaced by General Meade. Now, General Meade is like the polar opposite of Dan Sickles and Joseph Hooker in his personal life. He's like a very religious guy, very squared away, not drinking, not partying, not cheating on his wife, just hardcore West Point military man. So obviously Dan and this guy don't really get along, which may or may not play a factor in the upcoming Battle of Gettysburg. Again, we're not going to go over the entire Battle of Gettysburg. We would be here for like 6 hours if we did that. Basically, here is the Union line. This is where everybody is supposed to be. Dan Sickles is down here right at the very bottom where it says the word cemetery. That's where Dan Sickles is supposed to be. And while Dan is there with his core, he's looking around like, I don't think this is a good position. I think we're vulnerable to enemy artillery. We would be better off if we advanced forward into that peach orchard, which would make the Union line look like this. He would be just out there floating in the wind by himself. But Dan thinks that's what's going to be best, so he asks for some correspondence, some clarification on where he's supposed to be at. He basically gets told, I don't really care how you organize your troops, just stay in the Union line. Around the same time, Dan has reconnaissance groups that are out in the woods, and they get into this huge firefight with a bunch of Confederates. They come running back, and they tell him, you know, the Confederates are on their way. They're probably mounting their attack soon. Okay, so now there's a time clock on this decision. They're about to get attacked. Does Dan want to follow orders and stay where he's at, or does he want to do what he thinks is best, be in the eyes on the ground, and advance his men forward into this peach orchard? Well, last time he followed orders at Chancellorsville, it got all of his men lit up by artillery. He's not going to make the same mistake twice. He advances his corps into the peach orchard.
All right, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy!
Oh my god, he just ran in.
Once that's done, General Meade
That is fucking perfect! Oh my dear God, that is the perfect fucking example! You only did a Leroy Jenkins! And we all remember what happened with Leroy Jenkins.
comes rolling up and is like, what the fuck are you doing? You're 3/4 of a mile away from the Union line. You're out here floating in no man's land by yourself. Dan basically is like, well, fuck, I thought this was the right decision. I can pull him back if that's what you want. And right as he says that, cannon fire opens up and Confederate General Longstreet launches an attack. Okay, Dan Sickles has basically just made a humongous gap in the Union line, and now they're getting attacked, and General Meade has no time to do anything, so he just has to start rushing reinforcements into this big open gap, and he has to flood it with every spare man he has. He has to send in the entire 5th Corps, 2 divisions from 1st Corps, 3 brigades from 12th Corps, 5 brigades from 2nd Corps, and 1 brigade from 6th Corps to stop from breaking the Union line. Now, this is still hotly debated, but some people like to argue that Dan made the right decision because he was in the right place at the right time to blunt General Longstreet's attack, but the major consensus is he created a gap in the Union line and they almost lost the entire battle because of it. And Dan Sickles' 3rd Corps got absolutely wrecked, taking over 4,000 casualties. And while the battle was still going on, Dan was riding around on horseback, giving orders to his men, checking the line, and while he was on horseback, a cannonball comes and hits him in the thigh, missing his horse entirely, and he somehow manages to stay on the horse. Now, according to Dan, after the fact, he actually wrote that he didn't even realize he had been hit until he felt his leg was wet. Then he examined it, seeing that it was covered in blood, and then said, and I quote, I noticed my leg wasn't performing its usual functions. So now Dan Sickles gets off this horse, he gets put on a stretcher, he's getting carried off the battlefield, and according to the eyewitness accounts, he's got his hat over his face, and all the men are like, oh my God, General Sickles has died. And then as they're watching their general, their leader, the guy that they do in fact like and has led them into this battle, getting pulled off dead, he sits up on the cot, pulls his hat off of his face, and has one of his privates light his cigar and starts smoking as they carry him off. Okay, right or wrong?
Fucking based. Okay, that is a fucking boss move. And honestly, if he did that within a view of enough of his men, that would be perfect to just gas them up. To have him, like, they're loading him out, and everybody's like, oh my God, the general's dead. We really love the general. Oh my God, he's dead. And they're all of a sudden, they're feeling a sudden sense of, oh, we're so fucked because they just killed our general that we like. And then out of nowhere, he just takes his hat off, sits up, takes out a cigar, and has his private lighting just like, and yeah, a fucking aura farms right there on the stretcher. His men probably might have seen that and just been like, fuck yes, it's time to kick some ass. That must have been actually shocked. Surprisingly enough, yeah, it probably was a big fucking morale booster to see him take a fucking cannonball to the leg and just sit up, fire up a doobie and go get him. And then just, they just go fuck yeah and they start kicking ass.
The man's got style. From here he goes, he gets his leg amputated a third of the way up the thigh and then orders a private to place his severed leg into a cask of whiskey so he can keep it. He then donates it to a museum where it's still on display today. Which, fun fact, in the movie Lincoln, you can actually see it in the movie on display, except the leg isn't even decomposed yet and it still has his foot attached. Also worth noting, once his leg was on display, the first time he goes to see it, this was like the grand finale of the tour. The entire tour, he's just like pestering the tour guide like, yeah, cool. When do I get to see my leg again? And then once he finally gets to see his leg, he finds out that it's not his whole leg, it's just the 2 bones that got blown off, and he freaks out on the tour guide and is like, my foot! What did you guys do with my foot? You threw my foot away? So he was pretty upset about that initially, but he did go back to the museum every year to check in on his leg.
Some piece of work.
Personally, I like to think he used it to pick up chicks. You know what I mean? He's hitting on a woman and she's like,
yes.
How'd you lose your leg? Sweetheart, I haven't lost it. You want to go check it out? Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Anyways, so Dan Sickles is now recovering in the hospital. Obviously, his actions at Gettysburg were extremely controversial. While he's in the hospital, he gets visited by Abraham Lincoln. A lot of people believe this is a time that he took the time to tell Abraham Lincoln his side of the story, and he was actually the hero of Gettysburg that stopped Longstreet's attack. Then, after recovering for 3 months, Dan Sickles goes back to General Meade and is like, okay, I'm good. I'm ready to get back in action. I'm ready to keep fighting this war, which, whether you like the guy or not, that's pretty hardcore. General Meade is like, no. He's very polite about it. Basically tells him, you need more time to recuperate. But in reality, it's like, bro, you almost cost us the entire battle. Fuck no, I'm not putting you back in charge. At which point, General Meade goes back to, I don't know, fighting in the Civil War, kind of a busy guy, and Dan Sickles is at home with nothing to do but recover, so he decides that he's gonna go and tell his side of the story to everybody, while Meade is off fighting the war and unable to tell his side of the story. On top of that, he's basically gonna help with a political movement to have General Meade removed and have him replaced with, yet again, his buddy, Joseph Hooker. Now, keep in mind, I'm oversimplifying some of this just for the sake of the video, but basically what happens is General Meade gets called back to DC, has to go before this committee, and this committee's asking him questions about what happened, and they're parroting a lot of talking points that would be coming from Dan Sickles' mouth about how, like, Dan Sickles actually advanced on his own accord and stopped the attack from General Longstreet, and he had a firm hold on Little Round Top and the high ground, and this and that and the other. And General Meade is like, no, you guys don't understand. He did not have a firm control of the situation. I had to move thousands of men. I had to rearrange the entire battlefield to keep us from losing. At no point did he have that situation under control. But Meade was still being a class act. He was being charitable, and he did reiterate that basically, I do believe that Dan Sickles was doing what he thought was best. I don't think he did this maliciously or on purpose in any way. I think he just made a mistake and a bad judgment call, and it had consequences. So now at this point, both sides of the story are out, and it's getting hotly debated. And wouldn't you know it, a couple of days later in the New York Herald, they publish an article from an anonymous person by the name of Historicus. And this guy is well written, kind of sounds like a lawyer, and knows an awkward amount about the Battle of Gettysburg, particularly Dan Sickles' position and what Dan Sickles' opinions are on the subject. He then basically goes on to slander Meade, his actions taken, and then declare that Dan Sickles was right in moving into the peach orchard, and we know this because we won the battle. Therefore, it must have been the right move. That's like going on a road trip, having a tire blow out, and then having to put the spare tire on the roadside, and then still making it to your destination, and then being like, yeah, no, blowing out the tire was all part of the plan. Clearly, everything went as good as it could have. Regardless, the scandal eventually dies down. Dan Sickles violently defends his position that he was right for the rest of his life. He even later on becomes friends with his adversary, General Longstreet, who also then declares Dan Sickles was correct in what he did, and he's probably the only reason that the Union won the Battle of Gettysburg. So, I don't know. Maybe not. I'll let you guys decide.
Tough call. That's a tough call.
So Dan winds up making a full recovery, at which point he decides he's going to stay in the military. He's just not allowed to have a combat role anymore. So for the rest of the Civil War, he performs different administrative roles at the rank of a general. After the Civil War, he's pretty much immediately sent on a covert diplomatic mission down to South America to reaffirm a treaty they have with Colombia, which he does successfully. After that, he returns back home to America, at which point, still serving in the military, he serves as the commander of the Department of South Carolina, the Department of the Carolinas, and the Department of the South. Basically, oversimplified version of what that means is after the Civil War, they couldn't just flip a switch and then the government that was functioning prior to the Civil War was just going to start functioning how it was supposed to all over again. So the army had to go down south and kind of run stuff for a while. So by Dan being in command of those departments, he was basically the military governor of that area, so to speak. Teresa, his wife, winds up passing away from tuberculosis in 1867. Shortly after that, he leaves the U.S. military, where he takes the job as the U.S. minister to Spain, and he moves off across the ocean. And Dan Sickles, despite being one one leg down and 50 years old at this point, is still Devil Dan because he finds himself a new wife over in Spain pretty much immediately. And again, she's too young for him. Her name's Carmina, and I believe when they got married, she was 23 years old. And you know, 23 and 50, not great, but I will give the guy credit where credit's due. At least he's improving, and she was a fucking adult this time. They stay married the entire time that he's living in Spain, but ultimately wind up separating because she doesn't want to move back home to America with him. We don't really know why. Maybe it's because she just didn't want to leave her home. Maybe it's because allegedly Dan Sickles was also porking Queen Isabella II. Okay, I mean, granted,
Even now? Oh my god! This man was fucking the queen! And that's like, wow. He was a chubby chaser. In his 50s, Dan Sickles was a chubby chaser. Oh, holy shit.
like, you know, but she's still the queen. Like, whether he's taking one for the team to advance the political football or he's just doing it for the love of the game, he's a 50-year-old man with one leg. This is impressive. We got to study this guy's game at all costs.
We're going to need details. Copious details.
I told you the leg in the museum was the least interesting thing this guy's done. Anyways, he goes back home to America. He gets appointed to the New York Monument Commission, at which point he actually does a lot of good. He gets a lot of monuments put up. He's actually instrumental in making sure that Gettysburg gets turned into Gettysburg National Park and is preserved forever. And just to be clear, that wasn't like a quick thing. He was the chairman of the New York Monuments Commission for like 20 plus years. During these decades, he actually does serve as a U.S. congressman again, which is actually where he's able to push through the bill to galvanize Gettysburg National Park. And then shortly after he leaves his seat as congressman, he also gets awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions taken at Gettysburg when he's like 74 years old, like 30 years after the fact. I'm sure he didn't pull any political favors to make that happen.
No.
From here, he continues to serve as the chairman of the New York Monuments Commission pretty much for the rest of his life until 1812, when he's 93 years old, he gets removed. Which raises a question, why was he removed as the chairman of the New York Monument Commission? Well, I'll give you multiple choice guesses. Option A, he was 93 years old and he was elderly and it was time to retire. Option B, Dan Sickles was still Devil Dan, hobbling around town banging hookers, and $28,000 went missing and nobody knows where it went. Now,
oh, fucking yours! Oh my god! He really was flopping his dancicle all over the fucking world. Chat, again, gentlemen in chat, I once again pose this question to you. Is this man not your fucking spirit animal? If you tell me no, you're a fucking liar.
Now, to be completely intellectually honest and fair to Dan, we genuinely don't know what happened to the $28,000. Why don't we know? Because all the receipts and paperwork associated with how the funds were spent burned down in a mysterious fire that nobody knows who started it.
Of course.
Shortly after that, Dan Sickles would pass away at the age of 94 years old. And that is the story of Devil Dan Sickles. Just to recap, introduced a prostitute to the queen.
Okay, yes. Okay, okay, you're right. Minus the PDF. Minus the PDF stuff, okay? PDF stuff out of the equation. Everything else about this guy basically fucking anything with two tits, a hole, and a heartbeat. Tell me that ain't your spirit animal. Minus PDF.
Shot the son of the guy who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner in front of the White House in broad daylight and got away with it by becoming the first person in world history to plead temporary insanity. Rebounds by becoming the first general in charge of an entire corps without having gone to West Point. Then proceeds to get his leg blown off in combat and have it immortalized in a museum display. Then basically becomes a military governor over several states. Then basically becomes a spy by going on covert diplomatic missions. Then he goes over to Spain where he bangs the Queen, plays a critical role in the creation of Gettysburg National Park and Central Park in New York City, then becomes a Medal of Honor recipient 30 years after the fact, then allegedly steals $28,000 to go bang a bunch of hookers when he has one leg at 93 years old and gets away with it because the man is allergic to consequences. It's incredible. I don't even know where to go from here. I guess that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch, maybe drink some Echelon. Links for both of those over at fatelectrician.com. Quack bang out. Doing this entire video was just me doing research like how does this guy never have negative consequences ever? He gets away with everything. Real quick, technically I was supposed to tell you about this way earlier in the video, but I didn't want to interrupt the story. If you ever noticed, I'm always wearing different watches in my videos. I collect them. I'm a huge watch nerd, and one of my favorite watches of all time is the Tudor Pelagos FXD GMT, and I partnered up with a company called Fan of Them, and we're going to be giving one away. If you want to check out how to have a chance at winning one, I'll pin a comment down below, and it's also available over at thefatelectrician.com. Thanks for watching.
Oh my God. That was insane! That was absolutely fucking insane!
So moral of the story, politicians have always been PDF sexists who cheat on their wives.
And create all new laws to cover up their absolutely insane fuck-ups. Yes, all of the above. Holy crap, that was nuts! That was absolutely nuts, and I loved every moment of it.